Colonel Everett grabbed the Nightshade badge off her vest with both hands and ripped it free. The metal clasp tore through the fabric with a sound like a small bone breaking. He held it up between two fingers, the way you hold something contaminated. "You think this still means something?" He dropped it into the dirt, then he stepped on it, grinding his boot heel, slowly, deliberately, watching her face the entire time. "Mercer almost died because of you. You don't get to wear that anymore." Harper looked down at the badge in the dirt. Then she looked back up at him and said absolutely nothing. That silence was louder than anything she could have screamed. Before we continue, if stories like this move you, be sure to subscribe and follow along until the very end. Drop a comment letting me know what city you are watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. Morning came in hard at FOB Sentinel. It always did in Afghanistan. The sun didn't just rise. It detonated a white blast that turned everything to bleached bone early in the day, leaving the air tasting like metal and old dust. It was the kind of heat that made younger soldiers walk slower, drink more water, and curse under their breath. It was the kind of heat that Harper Hayes had long since stopped noticing. She was already at the pile at dawn. The sandbags were stacked near the eastern perimeter wall, a task assigned and reassigned for days because nobody wanted to do it. Heavy lifting in the dead heat of summer. No glory, no combat value. Just scooping, filling, tying, stacking. Repeat until your back gave out or the sergeant told you to stop. It was the kind of work you gave to soldiers who had screwed up, or soldiers who didn't matter. Harper was here for the first reason, though most people at FOB Sentinel assumed the second. She worked with a rhythm that was almost mechanical. Shovel into the pile, pack the bag, firm, tie it, clean, lift it to the stack. There was something almost meditative about it, if you were the kind of person who could find meditation in humiliation. Harper wasn't sure yet whether she was that kind of person. Some mornings she thought yes. Most mornings she wasn't so sure. The badge on her vest caught the early light. It was small black enamel with a silver outline of a hawk mid-strike wings tucked back, talons forward. Nightshade Unit, Tier 1. The kind of badge that made other Special Operations soldiers go quiet when they saw it. The kind of badge that told a story without a single word. A story about selection courses that broke people. About deployments nobody talked about in public. About operations that didn't have official names. Here, on a sandbag detail at FOB Sentinel, it looked like a mistake. Private Brody Caldwell was young, fresh out of basic training, and absolutely convinced that the woman on sandbag duty had stolen the badge off a dead body. There was no other explanation that made sense to him. He had been watching her for a while from his post near the motor pool, nudging Specialist Sierra Rollins every time the badge caught the sun. "I'm telling you," he said under his breath. "She stole it." Rollins didn't look up from her phone. "Caldwell, you have said the dumbest things I have ever heard a human being say, and that includes the time you said sharks were technically fish." "They are technically fish." "Shut up about the sharks, and shut up about the badge. Then explain what she's doing on sandbag detail." Rollins finally looked up. She studied the woman at the pile for a long moment. The controlled movements, the economy of effort, the way she never paused, never wasted emotion, never looked up to check if anyone was watching. "Something happened," Rollins said quietly. "What does that mean?" "It means something happened, and she's here, and you should probably mind your own business." Caldwell opened his mouth, then closed it again. He kept watching Harper work, and he didn't say anything else. But something in the way the woman carried herself made him feel vaguely ashamed, without really understanding why. Harper was on her next bag when Sergeant First Class Garrett Thorne appeared. Thorne was the kind of NCO who had been slightly too comfortable with authority for slightly too long. He had a belly that stretched his uniform in a way regulations technically didn't permit, a clipboard he carried like it gave him supernatural powers, and a voice that was roughly louder than it needed to be at all times. He stopped several feet away and stared at her back for a moment. Hayes. She didn't stop working. Sergeant, you're stacking those wrong. She paused just for a beat, just long enough, then continued. They're stacked in an offset brick pattern for structural integrity. I didn't ask for a tutorial. No, you said I was stacking them wrong. The clipboard came up slightly a defensive gesture she recognized from countless conversations with countless men like Thorne. You got a problem with following instructions from your chain of command? Harper set down the bag she was holding, turned and looked at him. Thorne's expression shifted just slightly, just enough. Something in her eyes made him take a half step back without realizing he'd done it. She didn't look angry. She didn't look defensive. She looked the way a very patient, very skilled person looks when they've decided to have a very specific conversation. Sergeant Thorne, she said gently, what would you like me to do differently? I want you to stack them the way I tell you. How would you like them stacked? He pointed. Straight, not that pattern thing. She looked at the stack, then back at him. Straight stacking is structurally weaker. A straight stack will shift under lateral pressure wind blast waves, or just someone bumping it hard enough. Are you arguing with me? I'm giving you information. I didn't ask for information, Hayes. I told you you were doing it wrong. The silence stretched out. It lasted only moments, but it felt like an eternity. Thorne's jaw tightened. His clipboard went up another inch. Don't push me, he said. You're already here because you couldn't follow orders. Do you want to dig that hole deeper? Something crossed Harper's face then. Something fast and controlled, like a flinch that never quite completed itself. It was there and gone before Thorne could have named it, but it was there. He had hit something. They both knew it. No, Sergeant, she said. She turned back to the pile. Thorne stood there for a few more moments. She could feel it could track his position purely from the sound of his breathing. And then he walked away. She heard the clipboard smack against his thigh as he went a rhythm that sounded like barely controlled irritation. Harper scooped another shovel full of sand. The story she was carrying, the one Thorne had just grazed with a stick, had started weeks ago in a village called Cabell that didn't appear on most maps. It had been a hostage extraction. A development contractor named Hendricks had been grabbed by a Taliban cell operating out of a compound in the Kabul Valley. High value to the families paying ransoms, marginally interesting to the intelligence community, and deeply politically inconvenient to 3 different agencies for 3 different reasons. Nightshade had been tasked because the other options were slower, louder, or both. The mission brief had been clean. Compound layout confirmed, guard rotations verified, entry point established. A small team going in quiet, coming out with the target air support on standby nearby. What the brief had not mentioned was the second cell. It had not mentioned the second cell because nobody knew about the second cell. That was the problem with intelligence that looked clean. It looked clean because someone had scrubbed it, or because the other half of the story was sitting in a different building, talking to different people, and nobody had yet figured out that the 2 halves connected. The second cell was waiting. They had been waiting, Harper suspected, because someone had told them to wait. That was a different problem and a longer story. One that was still being investigated by people in buildings far removed from FOB Sentinel and its sandbag details. But on that night in the Kabul Valley, the waiting cell came through a wall that wasn't in the brief, and Silas Mercer took 3 rounds in the upper body at close range. He had survived. That was the first piece of luck, and Harper had spent weeks feeling grateful for it, in that specific hollow way you're grateful for things that were almost catastrophic. He was at Launchstool. He was recovering. He would probably walk out of that hospital on his own 2 legs, though he might never have full use of his right arm again. Harper had pulled him out herself. She had dragged him through the compound grounds while the rest of the team fought the second cell to a standstill. She had called the medevac herself, had held pressure on wounds she tried not to look at too directly, because looking at them would have required acknowledging information her mind wasn't ready to process in that moment. They had gotten the target out. Hendricks had been extracted. The mission on paper was a success. Off paper, the investigation was entirely about her decision-making in the final approach, about whether she had moved too fast, relied too heavily on intel she hadn't adequately verified, and failed to account for the possibility of a secondary threat. Colonel Everett had opinions about all 3. He had expressed those opinions at considerable volume, and eventually with a formal reassignment that ended with sandbag detail at FOB Sentinel. While the investigation ground through its bureaucratic machinery, she kept scooping sand. She didn't stop thinking about Mercer. She never stopped thinking about Mercer. Later that morning, 2 things happened almost simultaneously. The first was that Corporal Weston Clark came to relieve her for a water break, a gesture that was part of the official detail rotation and should have meant nothing. Except that Clark, who was young, brand new to the unit, and clearly nervous around her, stopped beside her and said very quietly, "Ma'am, for what it's worth, what happened in Cabell? I read the after-action summary. You pulled Mercer out under fire. That's not nothing." Harper looked at him. He looked like he immediately regretted speaking. "How did you read the after-action summary?" she asked. I have a friend in G2. He swallowed hard. I shouldn't have said that. No, she agreed calmly. You shouldn't have. He started to take a step back. She stopped him with a small motion, not a physical stop, just a shift in her posture that communicated clearly, I'm not done. Clark, she said. Ma'am? Thank you. He blinked, nodded once fast, and looked away. She could see his jaw working, processing something. Maybe the fact that she'd thanked him. Maybe the fact that she hadn't destroyed him for the security breach. Maybe just the general disorientation of being near someone who existed at a different frequency than the people he was used to. She took her water break. The second thing that happened was the convoy. She heard it before she saw it. A change in the sound of the bass, something that moved through the air the way a change in pressure moves through water before a storm. Vehicles. More vehicles than a routine resupply. The gate guards snapped to attention, which they didn't do for routine anything. Somewhere near the command building, someone shouted something she couldn't quite make out, and the shout triggered a cascade of smaller sounds. Movement adjustment. The particular shuffle of people trying to look like they hadn't been caught unprepared. Harper came back from her water break. She picked up her shovel. She told herself in the specific and practiced way she had been telling herself things for weeks that none of this was her business, that she was here to fill sandbags, that whatever was driving through the main gate was a matter for people with current operational status and active clearances, which she was not and did not have. She scooped another bag. The convoy cleared the gate. 5 vehicles, 2 MRAPs and 3 Humvees configured in a pattern that communicated importance without advertising it. The kind of arrangement that made a competent Tier 1 operator register VIP, Transport, Senior Officer, minimum 4-star equivalent security profile. The calculation happened in her mind before she'd consciously decided to make it, the way breathing happened before you decided to breathe. She focused on the sand. The convoy stopped near the command building. Doors opened. The base adjusted around the arrival, the way bases do. Small movements, straightened postures. A recalibration of the social atmosphere that rippled outward from the parked vehicles in concentric rings. Eyes front, Harper, she told herself. She was filling another bag when the footsteps changed. Not the background movement of the bass, but something specific, measured, deliberate, coming toward her. Her back was to the command building, facing the perimeter wall, and she tracked the footsteps with the part of her mind that never fully stood down. She registered 2 sets. One, authoritative, unhurried, moving with the kind of confidence that didn't need to perform itself. One, slightly behind, working to keep pace. She kept shoveling. The footsteps stopped several feet behind her. She waited. Specialist, said a voice, calm, pitched low, with the particular quality of someone who had learned long ago that they never needed to raise their voice to be heard. Who is this soldier? A pause. A second voice, younger, slightly tighter. Staff Sergeant Harper Hayes, sir. She's been assigned to perimeter maintenance detail. Perimeter maintenance. Yes, sir. The voice went quiet for a moment. Harper heard the exact second when the speaker saw the badge. She knew the sound of it, the slight pause in breathing, the micro-adjustment in posture. She had been around enough high-level operators to know what it sounded like when someone recognized what was on her vest and immediately revised their entire understanding of the situation. Staff Sergeant. She stopped, set down the shovel, and turned around. He was exactly what the footsteps had told her he would be. 4 stars on the collar, not the temporary field attachment of a visiting officer, but the lived-in authority of a man who had been wearing that rank long enough that it no longer meant anything to him personally, only functionally. Somewhere in his older years, his face weathered the way faces get when they have spent significant time outdoors in places that weren't designed for human comfort. Eyes that were doing the same thing her eyes did when she looked at something cataloging, weighing, filing. The aide was a young captain holding a tablet, looking profoundly uncertain about all of this. The 4 stars identified him before the aide could. General Sterling, Army Chief of Staff's office. She had seen his name in briefings, but had never been in the same physical space as him until this exact moment. He was looking at her badge, not with the uncertainty Caldwell had shown, not with the knowing discomfort Thorne had shown. With recognition, specific recognition, the kind that came from a person who had handled Nightshade assets before and knew exactly what the badge meant and what it cost to earn. Nightshade, he said. It wasn't a question. Yes, sir. Harper Hayes. Something in her chest went very still. Yes, sir. He looked at her once with a quick, complete assessment of someone who processes information fast. The sandbag pile, the shovel, the heat, the badge. Her. Why, he said, with a deliberateness that suggested the question was not rhetorical, is a Nightshade operator on sandbag detail? The aide shifted beside him. Sir, there's a pending investigation. It says Staff Sergeant Hayes was involved in an incident during an operation. I didn't ask you, Captain. The aide went quiet. Sterling kept looking at Harper. An inquiry. She answered smoothly. Following Operation Dark Threshold, a teammate was critically injured. The investigation is examining my operational decision-making. Who ordered this assignment? Colonel Everett, sir. Sterling's expression didn't change, but something in it settled the look of a man filing a name under a category. And you've been here how long? Weeks, sir. Something moved across his face then. Fast, controlled, but unmistakably there. It wasn't sympathy, not exactly. It was the expression of a person who has just identified a waste that bothers them on a principled level. Captain Adler, the aide was already reaching for the tablet. Sir, find out who Everett reports to and flag this assignment for review. Not a formal inquiry, just flag it. Yes, sir. Sterling looked at Harper one more time. At ease, Staff Sergeant, he said. And it came out like more than a command. It came out like a statement, like a decision. Then he turned and walked toward the command building. Harper stood there for a moment, looking at the place where he had been standing. The aide was already on the tablet, tapping fast, shooting her one quick, unreadable glance before following the general. Around her, the base had gone very quiet. Caldwell was staring from the motor pool. Rollins had actually put her phone down. Even Thorne, who had reappeared near the mess line, was standing very still with his clipboard at his side. Harper looked at all of them. Then she picked up her shovel. She was a few bags further along when the aide came back. He was alone this time, moving faster than before, and his expression had changed from uncertain to something else, something closer to cautious respect, which she recognized as the expression of a person who had just made several phone calls and learned things that revised their prior understanding. "Staff Sergeant Hayes," Captain Adler said. "General Sterling would like to speak with you privately." He paused. "Now." Harper set down the shovel. She looked at the pile. Dozens of bags. Done. Many more to go. She looked at Adler. "Now," he said again, and his voice had the specific quality of a person repeating a word because they needed you to understand that this was not a casual invitation. She pulled off her work gloves, folded them, and set them on top of the nearest sandbag with the same precise care she'd used all morning. Because precision was a habit, not a performance. And habits didn't pause for circumstances. "Lead the way, Captain," she said. They walked toward the command building. Behind her, she could hear the base adjusting again. The shift in the social atmosphere, the whispers starting, the story already changing in the minds of everyone watching. Shortly before, she had been the disgraced operator on sandbag duty. Something was different now. She didn't let herself think about what. Not yet. She walked straight, eyes forward, pace controlled. But her mind, her Nightshade mind, trained for exactly this, built for the moment when the situation changed faster than anyone expected, was already moving. The command building at FOB Sentinel was not impressive from the outside, which was intentional. From the inside, it was a concentrated mass of communication equipment, wall maps, classified network terminals, and the specific smell of burned coffee and cold, recycled air that existed in command centers everywhere on Earth, regardless of theater, conflict, or year. General Sterling was standing at the far wall when Harper entered. He had his back to her. He was looking at a map, a large tactical display covering a significant section of the region. His hands were clasped behind him. He was completely still in the way that genuinely powerful people are still. Not the stillness of inaction, but the stillness of something coiled. "Close the door," he said without turning. She heard Adler pull it shut behind her. "Staff Sergeant Hayes." Still not turning. "Tell me what actually happened in Cabell." She stood at parade rest. "There's an active investigation, sir. I've been advised not to discuss operational details." "I'm aware of the investigation." He turned then. "I'm asking you. Not for the record, not for Everett's investigation. I'm asking you, soldier to soldier. What happened in that compound?" She looked at him. The thing about very senior officers, the good ones, the ones who had actually been in places and seen things, was that you couldn't perform for them the way you could perform for people who hadn't. They'd seen performance. They could feel the difference between rehearsed and real. The same way she could feel the difference between a stable structure and one that was about to shift. So she told him. Not everything. Not the investigation details, not the classified operational specifics, but the shape of it. The brief, the compound, the second cell coming through the wall, Mercer going down the harrowing drag to safety, her hands on wounds she tried not to think about. When she finished, Sterling was quiet for a long moment. "The second cell," he said. "Yes, sir." "Not in the brief?" "No, sir." "And Everett is investigating your decision-making?" "Yes, sir." Not the intelligence failure. It wasn't a question, but she treated it like one. "I can't speak to the scope of the investigation, sir." Sterling looked at her steadily. "That's a careful answer." "It's the right answer, sir." Something that might have been approval moved across his face and vanished. "Weeks on sandbag detail," he said, "while an investigation that should have been resolved rapidly drags on, and the person who pulled her teammate out of a hot compound under fire is being treated like a disciplinary problem." She said nothing. "I have a problem, Staff Sergeant Hayes." She waited. "I have a CIA asset who has been compromised and is currently being held by a hostile cell not far from here. The asset's identity is on a clock. Every hour they are held, there's a chance that information starts moving. My standard Nightshade teams are hours away, minimum. Air assets are problematic for political reasons I don't need to explain to a Tier 1 operator." He paused. "I have a tight window." Harper stood very still. "I need an operator who can take what I have here, standard soldiers not Tier 1, and make them capable of a precision extraction before time runs out." The room was absolutely silent, except for the hum of electronics. "Sir," she said carefully, "I'm under investigation. I don't have operational status." "No," he agreed. "You don't. Granting me operational command would be irregular," she said. "Yes, more than irregular, sir." "Staff Sergeant." His voice hadn't changed, volume hadn't changed tone, but something in it shifted, became very specific. "I am asking you a question, not requesting your legal opinion. Can you do this?" The question landed in her chest and she felt it before she thought it. Mercer on the ground, her hands on his wounds. The investigation. Weeks of sandbags, Thorne's clipboard, and younger soldiers whispering about her badge. Cipher somewhere in a compound, on a clock. She looked at General Sterling. "Yes, sir," she said. "I can do this." He nodded once clean and final. "Then let's talk about your team." The briefing room smelled like stale coffee and old decisions. Harper stood at the far end of the table while Sterling spread a series of photographs across the surface, compound layouts, satellite imagery, timeline projections. Adler stood near the door with his tablet, entering information with the focused speed of someone who had learned that when Sterling was in motion, you stayed in motion too. "The asset's name is classified," Sterling said. "You'll know the asset as Cipher. CIA case officer embedded in the region for years. The cell holding Cipher is operating out of a structure south of Marawara. Numerous confirmed combatants, possibly more. 2 entry points, 1 vehicle on site." He tapped a photograph. "Cipher has a short window before the cell leadership decides that the intelligence value is less than the political value of a public execution." Harper studied the photographs. Her mind was already moving through them the way it always moved through tactical information, not just reading it, but inhabiting it, turning it over from the inside, looking for what wasn't there as much as what was. "You said you have a tight window," she said. "I said I have a tight window. Cipher has slightly more time. The difference is operational prep time." He paused. "Which means your window begins now." She looked up from the photographs. "What assets do I have?" Sterling nodded to Adler, who pulled up a list on the tablet and turned it toward her. She read it twice, then she set it down on the table very carefully in the way she set things down when she was managing a reaction she didn't want visible. "These are standard infantry," she said. "Yes, not special forces, not ranger qualified. Standard infantry soldiers currently assigned to FOB Sentinel." "That's correct." "General Sterling," she kept her voice level. "A precision extraction against heavily armed combatants in a hardened compound requires—" "I know what it requires," he said. "I also know what I have. And what I have is you, and 5 soldiers who are here and available immediately." He looked at her directly. "You asked if you could do this. I gave you the opportunity to say no." The room was quiet. She looked at the list again. A medic, a communications specialist, a marksman, a demolitions tech, a pilot. Not Tier 1. Not even close to Tier 1. But the specific combination wasn't random. Someone had thought about this.
Someone had assembled this list with a purpose.
You picked these 5 specifically, she said.
You're quick. Why these 5?
Sterling almost smiled. It didn't quite make it. Because they're the best 5 standard soldiers currently at this FOB. Not the most decorated, not the most senior. The best. He paused. Your job is to make them better than they know how to be, faster than should be possible, and get Cipher out alive.
Harper looked at the compound photograph one more time.
Where are they now? Waiting for you in Training Bay 3.
She straightened, picked up the photographs.
Sir, she said, I'll need the investigation suspended for the duration.
Already done.
I'll need full operational authority. No interference from Everett or anyone in his chain.
Agreed.
And I'll need access to everything you have on the compound. Every piece of intelligence, including the sourcing. I'm not walking into another cabal. Something shifted in Sterling's face. Something that acknowledged, without stating, that he understood exactly what she meant and why she meant it. You'll have it soon, he said.
She walked to the door. Staff Sergeant. She stopped.
Mercer pulled through, Sterling said. I checked before I came here. He's walking again. Partial function in the right arm, but improving. A beat. I thought you should know.
She stood with her hand on the doorframe for a moment.
Thank you, sir, she said. She walked out. The door clicked shut behind her, and in the corridor she stopped, pressed her back against the wall, and let out one slow breath, the kind that carries something heavy with it. Not relief, exactly. Not yet. Something more like the acknowledgement of a weight she'd been carrying for weeks, shifting slightly on her shoulders. Mercer was walking. She filed it. She'd feel it later, properly, when there was time. Right now, the clock was ticking. She moved. Training Bay 3 was a large open structure at the eastern edge of the base concrete floor, high corrugated ceiling, used for equipment maintenance and occasionally for training evolutions that needed space. When Harper pushed through the door, 5 soldiers were standing in a loose cluster near the center of the floor. They looked up when she entered. She took seconds to read them before she said a single word, the same fleeting moments she would have taken reading a compound layout. It was the most important assessment of the operation. The medic was a woman named Sloane Gallagher, compact, watchful, standing slightly apart from the others, with her arms crossed, not defensively, but with the particular self-containment of someone used to being in rooms where their specific skill made them both indispensable and peripheral. Her eyes tracked Harper the moment the door opened. The communications specialist was a young man named Julian Pierce. He was holding a small radio component, turning it over in his hands the way some people hold pens, a nervous habit with an object he felt safe with. Smart. Probably very good at what he did. Probably hadn't slept enough. The marksman was Mateo Navarro. Still. Very, very still. The kind of still that wasn't calm so much as concentrated. He was looking at the wall behind Harper with the patient inattentiveness of a man whose mind was already somewhere else, sighted in on a specific point in the future. The demolition specialist was Blair Kim, slightly shorter than the others, standing with her weight forward in the posture of someone who leads with action before consideration. She was looking at Harper with an expression that was almost challenging. Not hostile, just measuring. The pilot was Wyatt Dalton, the oldest of the 5. He had the particular composure of helicopter pilots who had been in bad situations. A looseness, almost a learned willingness to accept conditions that other people would refuse. He nodded when Harper's eyes reached him, like they were acknowledging each other from across a room at a party. Harper looked at all 5 of them. My name is Staff Sergeant Harper Hayes, she said. I'm not going to tell you my service history or ask you to be impressed by my qualifications. You've probably already looked me up, and you've heard different things depending on who you asked. That's fine. None of it matters for the immediate future. She paused. What matters is this. Somewhere east of here, a person is being held by people who will kill them if we don't go get them. That's the mission. You are the team I have. I am the operator you have. So let's get started." Nobody spoke for a moment. Then Blair Kim said, "Are you serious? In this amount of time?" "Yes." "To do what exactly?" "To turn you into something capable of a precision nighttime extraction against a hardened compound with heavily armed combatants." The silence that followed was a different kind of silence than the one before. It had weight in it, specific weight. The weight of 5 people doing rapid internal calculations and arriving at numbers that didn't add up. Pierce turned the radio component over in his hands twice. Respectfully, ma'am, that's not possible." "Possible was not the word you were reaching for," Harper said smoothly. "The word you were reaching for was reasonable. You're right, it's not reasonable. Reasonable is what you do when you have time and options. We don't have time, and our options are limited." She moved to the table at the edge of the floor and spread the compound photographs. "Come look at this." They came. All 5 moving to the table with the slightly reluctant momentum of people who weren't sure whether they were following orders or following curiosity. She saw the moment each of them looked at the photographs, the slight adjustment in posture, the involuntary focus that happened when the abstract became specific. "This is where Cipher is," she said. "This is what we're walking into. I'm going to show you exactly what the compound looks like, exactly where the threats are, and exactly what each of you is going to do when we go in." She looked up. "I need you to understand every detail of this compound so completely that you could navigate it in total darkness. Because that's what we're going to do." Navarro looked up from the photographs for the first time. "What's the entry point?" "There," she pointed. He leaned closer, studied it. "Guard post near the wall." "Yes." "So we neutralize the guard post first. That's my job." "Yes." He nodded once and went back to studying the photographs. Just like that. No debate, no hesitation, no demand for more information before he committed. Harper filed that. Navarro was going to be the easiest. "What's my role exactly?" Gallagher asked. "You stay with me during the breach. The moment Cipher is in our hands, you assess. Cipher may be injured. There may be complications I can't predict from this photograph." Harper looked at her steadily. "You are the reason Cipher survives the extraction, not just the rescue." Something in Gallagher's expression shifted. Her arms uncrossed just slightly. She was listening differently now. "I can do that," she said quietly. "I know you can," Harper said. And she meant it. It wasn't a performance. Gallagher heard the difference, and her chin came up a fraction. Kim leaned over the table. "Demolitions. So I'm blowing something. You're creating our exit route. The primary exit may not be viable. You're making sure we have a secondary." "How big?" "Big enough to move 4 people through quickly. Small enough not to bring the roof down." Kim almost smiled. "I like a challenge. Then you'll love tonight." The almost smile completed itself. Harper moved on. "Pierce," she said. He looked up from the photographs. "You're my ears and my voice for the duration of the mission. You will maintain communication with Dalton in the air. You will monitor every frequency that cell uses, and if anything changes between now and the moment we extract, whether additional personnel, anything, I need to know about it the moment you do." "What frequencies are they?" "I'll have that information for you shortly. The intelligence package is being assembled now." He nodded slowly. The radio component went into his pocket. His hands were steadier, Dalton Harper said. The warrant officer looked at her with those loose, accommodating eyes. "You're our way in and our way out. Insertion point is here." She pointed to a location on the map a short distance from the compound. "Quiet approach, low altitude. You'll hold at the extraction point here until I call you in. The moment you hear my signal, You are in the air. What's the signal? 2 clicks, then my voice. If you hear only clicks, stay put. If you hear nothing past the scheduled extraction window, I wait, Dalton interjected. No, she said. If you hear nothing past the window, you leave. You go back, you report. You do not come back in without a full combat package. Dalton held her gaze. You're saying you'll leave yourself behind. I'm saying I won't get my pilot killed trying to recover a mission that can't be recovered. She said it flat, without drama, the way you say something that's simply true. That is not a scenario I plan for. It's a contingency. Dalton was quiet for a moment. Understood, he said. Harper looked at all 5 of them. We have barely any time. The first block is drills. The next block is full simulation runs. The final stretch is rest equipment check and mission brief. Any questions? Gallagher raised her hand slightly, a gesture that was half military, half civilian, and entirely honest. 1 question. Go. Why us? I mean, there are special forces teams at other FOBs. Even if they're further out, why not wait for them? Because Cipher doesn't have time to wait, Harper said. And because the 5 of you are the best soldiers at this FOB. She paused. I read your files before walking in here. Gallagher, you stabilized a casualty under fire with no surgical equipment and 0 backup. Pierce, you maintained communication continuity through a complete hardware failure in a combat environment. Navarro, your qualification scores put you in the top tier of your cohort. Kim, you cleared an IED cache that engineers had already declared unworkable. Dalton, you have unparalleled flight hours in hostile airspace. She looked at each of them in turn. You were not randomly assigned to this mission. You were chosen because someone looked at what you could actually do and decided you were capable of this. My job is to make sure you believe it before we step off. The room was different after that. She felt it, the specific change in atmosphere that happened when a group of individuals shifted toward something more unified. Not a team, yet not close, but the first suggestion of a team. The way the first suggestion of warmth in a cold room was just enough to make you stop tensing against the cold. It wasn't enough, but it was a start. Gallagher, she said, get your medical kit. Full trauma load. We're going to talk about field assessment under fire. She looked at Kim. Kim, I need you to calculate a breach charge based on these wall specifications. Give me 3 options: minimal, standard, aggressive. Show your work. She turned to Navarro. Navarro, I want you to walk me through your standard neutralization protocol for a guard post, step by step, out loud. Finally, Pierce. Pierce, get your comm equipment set up in the corner. I want you listening to regional frequencies immediately so you're already familiar with the noise when the intelligence package arrives. She looked at Dalton. Dalton, go check your bird. I want it fully fueled and prepped. Report any issues directly to me. Dalton nodded, already moving. The room came to life. Not perfectly, there was the inevitable friction of people who had never worked together, the small collisions of different professional habits, the slightly too long pauses as people adjusted to taking direction from someone they didn't yet know. But they moved. They engaged. They started. Harper watched them for a moment. Then she pulled out the compound photographs and started memorizing details she hadn't memorized yet. Because there were always details she hadn't memorized yet. And the details were what killed you or saved you. And she had a rapidly shrinking window to be sure she knew every single one. Gallagher appeared at her elbow, medical kit open on the table beside her. They began talking quietly, specifically the language of field medicine under fire, which was both the most technical and the most human conversation you could have, because it was the conversation about what you did when everything went wrong. Behind them, Kim was muttering calculations under her breath. Pierce had his equipment spread in a careful arc across the floor, moving between components with precise, unhurried speed. Navarro had found a wall and was talking to it quietly, describing a neutralization approach, externalizing his process. The team was not ready, not even close. But something was happening in that room. Harper recognized it, had felt it before, in different rooms with different people, in the early hours of missions that had no business working but worked anyway. It was the feeling of a group of people beginning to decide, each privately and without announcement, that they were going to stop being afraid of the thing in front of them and start being serious about it. It was the very beginning of trust. She gave Gallagher a scenario: compound breach, multiple casualties, simultaneous, limited supplies, a collapsing window before the situation deteriorated. Gallagher listened, asked 2 precise questions, then answered. The answer was good, not perfect, but genuinely, functionally good. The answer of a person who had real skill and was beginning to let it operate without the filter of uncertainty. "That's right," Harper said, and again she meant it. Empty affirmation was a form of lying, and lying to your team was a way of killing them slowly. Gallagher looked at her. "You're not what I expected," she said quietly. Not an accusation. "What did you expect?" "I don't know. Someone harder, maybe? Or someone trying to be?" Harper looked at the photographs. Hard doesn't keep people alive. Precise keeps people alive. Hard just keeps people from asking for help when they need it. She turned a photograph over, studying the reverse. "Right now, I need all 5 of you to tell me everything you can't do. Every limit you have, every gap in your training, because those are the places that will surprise us if we don't close them." Gallagher was quiet for a moment. "I've never worked a live extraction," she said. "I've done casualty response in active situations, but never moving a target through a hostile compound." "Now I know," Harper said. "We'll drill that specifically, repeatedly." "I haven't done a fast rope insertion recently," Gallagher added. "My times are probably off. We'll run it tonight." A small pause. "Okay," Gallagher said. She straightened slightly, adopting the posture of a person who had just handed over a weight and found the person on the other side didn't flinch. Across the room, Kim looked up. "Hayes, standard breach charge for these wall specs. I'm looking at standard minimal or aggressive, but aggressive is going to be loud." She paused. "How loud can we afford to be?" "Loud enough to move through. Quiet enough that it doesn't change the response time of anyone beyond the compound perimeter." "Standard, then, to be safe. I'll run it past you before we finalize." "Roger." Hirsch looked up from his corner. "I've got active frequencies in the regional range. A couple of military, a couple I can't immediately identify. The ones you can't identify, flag them. That's where we'll find relevant chatter." He nodded and went back to work. Harper looked at the room again. The 5 of them working each in their lane, each beginning to show the specific competence that Sterling's list had promised. Not a team yet, but closer. She turned back to the compound photographs. Numerous confirmed combatants. She studied the eastern wall for a long time. A detail had been nagging at her since she first looked at the imagery. Something about the shadow pattern in the upper corner that didn't match the reported structure. She pulled the photograph closer. Her stomach tightened with the specific, cold clarity of a recognition she didn't want to be having, but absolutely needed to have. The reported compound had 2 stories. The shadow in that photograph suggested 3. She picked up the radio. "Adler," she said. "I need the full satellite package on the compound. Original imagery, not the processed version, and I need it right now." A pause. "Ma'am, the processed version is..." "The processed version is missing a floor," she cut in. "Get me the originals." Another pause, longer this time. "Yes, ma'am. Stand by." Harper set the radio down. She thought about Cabell, about a second cell that hadn't been in the brief, and she made herself a promise, the same promise she'd been making for weeks, that this time she would know every floor of every building before anyone set foot inside. The details were everything. The original satellite imagery arrived, confirming everything Harper had feared. 3 floors, not 2. The 3rd floor was a narrow structure built into the roofline, barely visible in the processed imagery because someone had smoothed it out during analysis. A room that size, at that position, served one of 2 purposes: a weapons cache or a holding cell. Harper stared at the imagery.
Pierce looked over from his corner.
"Something wrong?" "Everything's wrong," she said, "which means we just got more accurate." She spread the original imagery next to the processed version on the table and called the team over. All 4 of them, Dalton was still at the aircraft, came immediately. They moved like people who had decided to be involved. A small shift, but it mattered.
"Look at these 2 images," she said. "Tell me what's different."
Kim saw it first. "That's a 3rd floor."
"Yes, that wasn't in the brief."
No. The room went quiet in the specific way rooms went quiet when people were revising their understanding of how dangerous a thing was. Harper watched their faces, the private negotiations between what they'd committed to and what they were now being asked to commit to. Gallagher spoke first. "Cipher is up there."
Probably, Harper said.
"Which means our breach point changes." "Everything changes," Harper said. "Entry point, route timing, Navarro's position, all of it." She looked at them. "This is not a setback. This is information. The difference between a mission that fails because you didn't know something and a mission that succeeds because you found out in time is exactly this moment." She tapped the imagery. "We found out in time." She could see them deciding whether to believe that. Kim got there first. "Okay, so new plan." "New plan," Harper confirmed. She spent the next block of time rebuilding the mission architecture from the entry point up, talking through it out loud, inviting questions, insisting on questions. Silence in a planning session wasn't focus, it was anxiety wearing focus as a mask. Navarro asked about sight lines from the new floor to his position. He worked through the adjustments naturally. Kim recalculated her breach charge. Pierce identified a new, unknown frequency and cross-referenced it, finding a probable match to a hostile operating frequency. Gallagher didn't ask about the mission architecture. She asked about Cipher's medical profile. Harper keyed the radio. "Adler Cipher's medical profile. Do we have anything?" "Limited. Asset is middle-aged. Known cardiac history, minor. No other flags." Gallagher absorbed that. "Assume physical interrogation." She noted her hands moving methodically through her kit. "I'll need a second IV setup and extra saline." "Done. What else?" "That's it. I'll make it work." The calm competence of it taking a worst-case assumption and immediately converting it into a resource list impressed Harper.
Dalton's voice came over the comm.
"Hayes, bird is prepped and fueled. One issue. Left side avionics panel has a fault indicator. Maintenance says it's a sensor misreading, not an actual fault, but it'll be lit the entire flight. It's distracting." "Can you fly through a lit fault indicator?" Harper asked. A pause. She heard Dalton deciding between honesty and reassurance. "Yes," he said honestly. "It's not my preference, but yes." "Then we go with the aircraft we have," she said. She put the radio down and looked at the team. They had heard the exchange. "A lit indicator on a functioning aircraft is preferable to waiting for a perfect aircraft that doesn't exist," she said. "Dalton is qualified, experienced, and honest. That combination is worth more than a clean panel." The first drill started soon after. Harper had reconstructed a rough floor plan on the training bay floor using equipment crates, rope, and chalk lines, spatially accurate enough to train movement patterns. She ran them through it slowly, then half-speed, then full speed. The first full-speed run was a disaster. Kim moved too fast. Pierce's relay was delayed. Gallagher and Harper collided. Navarro was the only one who hit his marks perfectly. Harper stopped the run. Everyone expected the standard military response, pointed criticism and heat. She didn't give it to them. From the insertion point, slower this time. Pierce, I want you counting time in your head. Tell me when you're about to be late. The second run was better. The subsequent runs tighter still. Repetition moved knowledge from the mind to the body. During a break, Pierce asked, "When we go in, if something goes wrong, real wrong, what do we do?"
You execute the contingency, Harper said.
What if it fails? Then the next one.
What if there isn't one?
Then you make a decision with what you have and you live with it afterward. She looked at him. I cannot give you a plan that guarantees nothing goes wrong. I can give you the preparation to respond without freezing. The question you should be asking is, what is my job in the immediate future? Pierce nodded. The tightness around his eyes loosened slightly. As they moved into the night drills, run in near darkness, the difficulty spiked, then plateaued, then vanished. By the final runs, the team was moving through the chalk line compound with the flowing precision of people who had stopped thinking about the plan and started living inside it. Harper stood back and watched. She thought about Mercer, about Cabell, about the weight of leadership. She went through each team member in her mind, determining her response if they went down. Then she told herself she was getting all of them back. Both things were true. General Sterling appeared in the doorway. He watched the team reset. They're good, Harper said. I can see that. They're not Nightshade. No, they don't need to be. They need to be exactly what they are, operating exactly as well as they can. That's enough. Sterling handed her an update. A communication intercept confirmed Cipher's exact location on the 3rd floor. Rough interior schematic, 1 room, 1 door, 1 window, 2 guards alternating. The plan shifted again. Harper absorbed it. There's a debrief request from Everett, Sterling noted. He wants to speak with you. I told him to wait until after. Something settled in Harper's chest, cold and clean. Thank you, sir. Don't thank me. Come back with Cipher and we'll have a different conversation entirely. He left. Harper turned to her team. New information. It changes the 3rd floor sequence. We drill the revisions, then we rest. They didn't break stride. Deep in the night, the team loaded onto the aircraft. The flight was a tense, quiet period. Harper used it to run the mission one final time in her mind. She keyed the radio. Pierce, frequency status. Quiet. Flag channel had a brief coded burst earlier. Signals is working on it. Keep monitoring. She looked out at the dark terrain. Final check. Navarro ready? Kim ready? Gallagher ready? Pierce ready? Dalton pilot ready? Fault indicator is still lit, but aircraft is performing nominally. I trust your aircraft and your judgment, Dalton, she replied. Insertion was flawlessly clean. Dalton put them down in a shallow depression outside the compound. The team was out and moving instantly. The hike to the compound was deliberate and silent. Navarro took point, neutralizing the single guard exactly as rehearsed. Kim set the breach charge. Harper keyed her radio twice, the signal to Dalton. He was airborne, holding. Mark, she whispered. The breach detonated a concentrated impact. Harper was through the gap immediately, Gallagher right behind her. The ground floor was clear. Navarro peeled off to hold the stairwell. Pierce established his comm center. Kim held the exit route. Harper and Gallagher took the stairs. A deviation on the 2nd floor, a guard off his mark. Harper adjusted in a fraction of a second, neutralizing the threat silently. They reached the 3rd floor. 1 door. Harper breached it with momentum. The solitary guard inside fell to her practiced speed. And there was Cipher, bound on the floor. American, Cipher rasped. American, Harper confirmed. Can you walk? Gallagher was already assessing. Dehydration, contusions, ambulatory. I've got you, she said, helping Cipher up. Then Pierce's voice broke over the comms. Hayes, flag channel just went active. Multiple repetitions.
I think it's a check-in that didn't get answered.
The guard on the second floor. How long do we have? Harper asked.
Minutes, maybe less. She keyed the radio. Kim, secondary exit, now.
Waiting on your signal. They moved fast. Down the stairwell. Movement at the main gate, Navarro reported. 2 personnel, armed. They know something's wrong.
Hold until we clear, then fall back, Harper ordered.
First floor. The compound was waking up. 10 seconds, Kim warned.
The secondary breach blew opening into the pre-dawn dark. Go, everyone through. Gallagher guided Cipher out. Pierce, Navarro, Kim, all moving with rehearsed fluidity. Harper was last. Behind her, she heard shouts and disorganized gunfire.
Extraction point, now, she told Dalton. Holding, Dalton replied, calm and ready. They ran. The rotors roared overhead as the helicopter descended. They loaded with practiced speed. Go, Harper said, pulling herself in. The aircraft banked and climbed, leaving the chaotic compound far below. Harper looked at her team, all present, all breathing. Gallagher was already running an IV for Cipher. Cipher looked at Harper. How long did they have me? Days, Harper replied. That's over, Harper said softly. Pierce pulled off his headset.
Clear on all frequencies. No pursuit. He exhaled.
We did it.
Harper looked at them all. You did it. I showed you the door. You walked through it.
Mostly true, Kim smirked. You walked through it with us. The helicopter flew toward the dawn. They touched down at FOB Sentinel. The medical team rushed the aircraft. Gallagher refused to step back until she had delivered a precise professional handoff to the lead doctor. Cipher gripped Gallagher's wrist tightly for a moment in silent gratitude before being wheeled away. That's why I do this, Gallagher murmured. General Sterling stood nearby with Captain Adler and a few officers. Not Colonel Everett. Cipher is alive and ambulatory, Harper reported. Mission complete. 0 casualties. Sterling nodded. Good work. He wasn't performing gratitude. He was stating a fact. My office shortly. I want you there for several conversations. He turned away. Harper faced her team. They were looking at her, waiting for an acknowledgement of what had just transpired. You should know something, she told them. What you did out there, that was not ordinary. I have worked with Tier 1 operators who would not have performed with the precision you showed. You were chosen because someone believed in you. I trained you because I agreed. You proved us both right. That permanently changes who you are. A collective breath released. The team dispersed lighter. Gallagher lingered.
When you went through that 3rd floor door, you knew there was no angle advantage. Weren't you scared?
Yes, Harper answered honestly. What did you do with it? I went anyway. Gallagher nodded slowly, absorbing a truth she now owned as well. She walked away. Harper stood on the landing pad, breathing in the cold air and aviation fuel. She thought about Cabell. She thought about how surviving failure had made this victory possible. That was what Everett had never understood. The investigation wasn't wrong to examine her. What was wrong was the assumption that being tested and scarred made her broken rather than seasoned. She walked into General Sterling's office. Sterling sat behind the desk. Adler was there, and sitting across from Sterling was Colonel Everett. He looked like a man who had used his waiting time to revise everything he had planned to say. Staff Sergeant Hayes, Sterling said. Close the door. She did. Everett cleared his throat and met her gaze. The investigation is being closed, he stated tightly. Findings are inconclusive on the decision-making question. The intelligence failure in Cabell is being separately reviewed. Your operational status is reinstated, effective immediately. The room was quiet. Harper said nothing. Everett looked down, then back up. What you did out there? With a standard unit? I've read the preliminary report. He stopped, swallowing hard. That was Nightshade work. It was their work, Harper corrected softly. I gave them the tools. They used them. Everett held her gaze for a moment longer, then looked away. Sterling handed Harper a folder. Inside was her reinstated operational file, full clearance, Nightshade designation restored. And at the bottom, a recommendation for the Silver Star, submitted by Sterling himself, citing the extraction against superior numbers with 0 friendly casualties. She looked up. Not because the operation succeeded, Sterling clarified. Because of what you did to prepare for it. Taking 5 strangers and turning them into a team capable of a Tier 1 extraction. That's real leadership. Harper closed the folder. Sir, I'd like to make a request. The 5 soldiers from the operation, I'd like formal recognition submitted for each of them. Independent commendations tied to their individual performance. They earned it. I want that documented before anything else is. Sterling looked at her, then picked up a pen. You heard her, Adler. Yes, sir, Adler said, already typing. Everett stood up. He picked up his cover, gave Harper one final look, the look of a man making a final revision to a long-held worldview, and nodded. Just once. Not an apology, just an acknowledgement of the truth.